Hello everybody, it's Dr. Joel Hunter here to talk to you today about your assignment for this coming week. And welcome, we're here with Philosophy 135, Introduction to Ethics, and we're in our second week of Applied Ethics, and this week's topic is abortion. And you have three readings for this week. One of the readings is an argument by Judith Jarvis Thomson, and it is called A Defense of Abortion. And the second article is by Don Marquis, and it's called Why Abortion is Immoral. And the third article is by someone we've read before, Philippa Foot, and it is on the doctrine of double effect and abortion. So here's how this breaks down for what you're going to be expected to get out of these readings and then take the quiz successfully. All right, so one thing to note, just as a side note, is Thompson's essay, the first one, was written in 1971. And that is 2 years before the Supreme Court ruled on the famous Roe v. Wade decision, which made the constitutionality of abortion, which supported the constitutionality of abortion. And that, of course, that ruling has been challenged numerous times since 1973. So it's interesting to see a philosophical defense of abortion occurring before that ruling. The second essay, which is an essay about why abortion is immoral, is written in the late 80s. And what's interesting about that, or maybe mid-80s, what's interesting about that is that was during the time of the Reagan administration, and you could liken the topic of abortion in terms of the national interest in it to something like terrorism. Now, I'm not talking about terrorism of this past week, since it's really been heightened as a result of what happened in Lebanon and Paris, Nigeria, and so on. But I'm talking about terrorism sort of generally, how that has been a hot topic over the last, let's say, 10 years. It always registers pretty high in, people's concerns, political concerns. And so abortion in late 70s, early 80s was like that. And part of that was because there were numerous attempts by states to find ways to legally, constitutionally restrict abortion as a way of not necessarily overturning Roe v. Wade, but as a way of trying to introduce further regulation on access to abortion and the legality of it under certain circumstances. So this comes up in numerous kinds of ways. Most recently, it was the topic was partial birth, or so-called live birth abortion. And so it'll be interesting as you read these essays, which really didn't envision those practices, how their arguments play out in those kinds of scenarios, because they are actually touched on. So what was the other thing I was going to say about this? Oh, yes. And so another thing to bear in mind as you're reading these essays is that it's also obviously a contemporarily relevant topic, and will be next year, especially when the Supreme Court hears a case from Texas. So they're going to be ruling on that probably in June. But you'll probably be hearing about the arguments, early part of next year. So be looking for that. And one thing that I may do on your final exam is try to find a good source to present to you what the facts are in that case, and then get you to apply, one of our authors or one of our normative theories, to figure out what you think is the morally right thing to do about that decision. I'm thinking about it. I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but just to keep you attuned to the fact that the kinds of real world issues that we're talking about in this section are things that you will confront, in your own life if you haven't already. And so it's not going away, and it continues to be a very polarizing issue. So I think it's really helpful if we try to sort of pull back from the rhetorical part of the debate and look more at the actual arguments. And that's where philosophy helps us. So philosophy is trying to remain objectively neutral and examine the arguments for their own merits as much as possible. Okay, so let's take a look at those readings in that spirit and in that light, and hopefully it will shed some light on the different positions and hopefully clarify your own position too about this subject, as I hope that happened with genetic enhancement in your previous week. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just quickly introduce to you what's going to be on your next quiz. It's quiz 10. I can't believe we're already in double digits in the quizzes. You've taken a lot of quizzes, right? But that's, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mention the Philippa Foot article. And there's a reason for that, because it's not as prominent on your quiz. There's only 4 questions from the Foot reading. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide since that's going to be relevant. So let me back up before I get to Philippa Foot. Sorry, I don't go from a script. I just make this up as I go. So there's 18 total questions. There's 15 of your standard questions that you had already, multiple choice, true, false, multiple answer. Now, of those, there are 6 from the Thompson reading. There are 5 from the Marquis reading, and there are 4 from the Foot reading. Okay. And so that totals 15, I hope. And then you have 3 essay questions, and all 3 essay questions pertain to the first 2 readings, not to the Foot reading. The Foot reading is the most difficult of the 3, and it's there primarily to help you, to lead you into some of the other moral criteria that might be relevant to helping us figure out what's the right moral stance to take on abortion in particular circumstances. It's really hard to come up with a general theory about the morality of abortion. Almost everyone is going to say, opponents of abortion are going to, look, there are certain cases where it is appropriate. Abortion should be accessible, should be legal and safe and all of that. And then there are also supporters of abortion, plenty of supporters of abortion, who would argue, oh, look, there are reasonable limits on, on the application of abortion. So what Foot does then is kind of help you look at the other relevant moral criteria in sorting out those kinds of issues. Like, where do we draw the line? Because that's often the hardest thing to do. So there are a number of principles that have been suggested for how one draws a line. And one of the most common is called the doctrine of double effect, which is used in Catholic thinking, but it has applications beyond theological or religious arguments. And that's what Foot's doing. She's appropriating that doctrine because it is so frequently referenced. And the doctrine, real quickly, makes a distinction between the results one foresees in your action and the results you intend by your action. Many times we try to figure out moral problems and not make that distinction. But if you make that distinction, it helps us explain why there are certain actions that we would immediately say, oh yeah, well, the right thing to do is X and not Y. And what Foot is doing with the doctrine of double effect is showing how, even though it's been used frequently to explain moral intuitions about abortion, it turns out not to be that helpful. And so she talks then about other candidates for moral criteria that we can apply to help make sense of why we have certain intuitions about the morality or immorality of abortion. Okay? So that's what the Foot article is about, and that's not going. I'm not asking you to respond to that with an essay or a short essay, because it's just harder. It's a more dense piece, but it's still helpful. So it's challenging, but I want you to give it a go, and I've got 4 questions for you on that. Okay, so the other 2 readings then are the more prominent ones, and let's talk then about the essay questions that you're going to have. And I want you to be able to prepare your answers ahead of time, as you did on the previous quiz. And so let's go into that. Before I plunge into it, I just want to see, for those of you tuned in, if you have if you can just give me a quick nod that you're here and that you're ready to talk about the essay questions, maybe some hearts, or maybe just shout out your name. Give me some indication that you are ready to plunge ahead. Okay, I'm seeing a few hearts. Excellent. Good. Well, I hope that giving you these essay questions ahead of time is helpful to you, and that the time that you have to work on them when you actually open up the quiz on Canvas is sufficient if you have prepared the answers ahead of time. I think it'd be really hard to pull it off if you didn't have the answers, or if you didn't have the questions ahead of time. So I'm interested in feedback from that, from your first experience with it. If those of you who are here, if you want to chime in about that anytime, just go ahead and feel free to say something about it. And it would be good to, if you do, because then your comments can be captured on the replay, and others can see and maybe, you know, add their own voices to how helpful having the essay questions is. Okay, good. Why am I talking so fast today? I don't know why, but I guess I'm trying to get through a lot, or I want to finish early or something. Okay, I'll slow down. Good. So your first essay question is like the other ones. And this is the one where you are going to look at our prior readings in normative theories, and you're going to pick one and explain why you think, in this case, Thompson, right, the first essay, which normative theory you think best supports Thompson's position. Okay. So let me back up for just a second and explain what's going on with this question and the one like it. So what the moral theories, the normative theories do, is they provide you a framework that is systematic and coherent, to help you sort of narrow the field of possible principles that you can apply to your moral reasoning. It's not that. Here's what it isn't. The normative theories, and selecting one to sort of represent the author, it's not that the normative theories, that there is one theory that matches up with the pro position, or one theory that matches up with the con position. It's not like that, because the theories, each of the theories can be adopted, the framework can be adopted, and then arguments can be constructed both for and against the position. So the normative theories are giving you the sort of tools with which to argue. They don't necessarily give you the answer to the moral question. Does that make sense? That's really important to understand, because I don't want you to misunderstand these essay questions and think that there is only one normative theory that is expressed by the author, or that is compatible with what the author's argument is. I think in each case there's going to be a best fit, but there isn't necessarily, you know, a one answer question. So a lot depends on how well you support your case for why, let's say, contractarianism is the best fit for Thompson's position. Okay, just for example. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense, because I just don't want you to misunderstand what you actually get out of applying the theories. The theories are very, very powerful. They give you concepts and tools to use, but they don't necessarily lead you to the right answer, or even the strongest argument. It's a framework. Right. So what you need to show then, and this is the key, what you need to show are two things. You need to show that you understand what those tools are provided by the theory. Okay, so if we're talking consequentialism, you need to show that you understand that its key principle is results. Is what we do is we measure the goodness of the results, right? So if you've got that, then apply that consistently to the author in question and see what you get, right? The same thing with Kant, all right? The same thing with contractarianism. You want to make sure that you show that you understand the key principle or principles of the theory, and then apply it accurately to the authors. author's argument. Okay, I hope that's clear, or clearer. I don't know why I'm feeling very, very doubtful about that, but I hope it was a little clearer. Right. So let me say one more thing about that, because I want to underscore this. When you pick the normative theory to use as the basis for your answer, you are not picking the right answer from and the rest are wrong. That is not what is happening. Any of those positions, any of those theories could be a right position to take. It all comes down to how you represent that theory, and if you succeed in connecting it to the author's position. Okay? So, hopefully that was clear. All right, let's go to the next. We're going to ignore that phone call. It's just the FBI. Okay, number next is the same question for Don Marquis' essay. Okay, and in this case, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're looking to find which of the normative theories best fits his argument or best supports his argument, and then you make that case in a short essay. And again, these essays are, I would say, no more than a long paragraph. I would think 300 words is more than sufficient. If you go on further than that, I mean, you're welcome to do that, but you should be able to make your points, within a long paragraph. But that's just a rule of thumb. Okay, and then the last one is going to be probably the hardest one. So let's take a look at this one at length. I'm going to have to look over here to read it. All right. Choose either the position of Thompson or Marquis. In your response, first state what you think the other philosopher would raise as his or her objection to the position of the philosopher you've chosen. Okay, so just to give you an example, let's say you choose to look at the position of Don Marquis. So what this is asking you to do is, what do you think then, if you're taking Marquis, what do you think Thompson's main objection would be to Marquis' argument? Okay, so that's part one. Then compose a rebuttal to this objection using the concepts of the philosopher you've chosen. Okay, so first of all, what you're demonstrating is that you understand both authors. All right, and so you're going to advocate for one of the authors. And to start off that advocacy, you're going to start by saying, well, here's what the author I rejected, here's what they would say against this author's argument in this article. Okay? So you state that objection, and then your job is, for the remainder of the essay, to provide a rebuttal sort of in the voice of the author you've chosen to that objection. Okay, so if you take Marquis' position, then you give, here's what Thompson would object to in Marquis' argument. And then you say, but Marquis would respond with a rebuttal like this. Okay, I'm not saying to actually use those words, but that's what you're doing. That's the structure of the essay. Okay, I hope that's clear. So if you take Thompson's position, then you would say, well, here's what Marquis would argue. Here's the objection that Marquis would raise. And then you develop a rebuttal to that objection using the position of Thompson. Okay, so the challenge to it is to get them to talk to each other, because it's not obvious that they do. All right, so Thompson's essay is looking at the morality of why it is sometimes reasonable to kill a human being, okay, a person. She grants that the fetus at a certain point in development is a human person. She grants that. She's not necessarily agreeing with it, but for the sake of argument, she's granting it. And so, given that's the case, she's trying to weigh the competing rights of, on the one hand, the right of the fetus not to be killed, that is granted to be a human person, and on the other hand, the right of the mother to not have her body interfered with, to be able to dispose of her body as she chooses. Okay, so those competing rights then is what she's trying to navigate. So the question then becomes, how do you get how do you get someone like Thompson, whose argument is, I mean, he also sort of accepts the personhood status of the fetus, but it isn't actually relevant to his argument as to why abortion is immoral. He instead looks to this principle of a future like ours, right? So the reason we don't kill, a child or an infant is because that would be depriving them of a future of experiences and enjoyments, a future like we sometimes think of ourselves as having, right? And so his argument is using that concept, that principle. And so you need to think about, okay, so this future like ours position of Thompson, here's what his objection would look like to, of Marquis. Here's what his objection would look like to Thompson. And here's how Thompson would respond to the future like ours argument of Marquis. You get that? That's the challenge in this essay. So it's I'm not saying it's easy, but hopefully you get what you're being asked to do here. Okay, and I don't mind telling you some of these things to help you along. So let's just look at the rest of this question and see if there's anything else that we need to address. If you find those concepts, that is the concepts of the philosopher that you've chosen to adopt, okay, if you find the concepts inadequate to argue for the rebuttal, then you may introduce one or more new concepts to support your argument. Okay, so this is the challenge of the getting them to talk to each other thing. So if you find that Thompson's conceptual vocabulary in her article is not sufficient to address the future like ours argument of Marquis, then you need to come up with, well, here's what we add to Thompson's argument in order to address and rebut Marquis' argument. Okay? So you introduce the concepts you need if you do need them. And then you need to, as part of introducing that concept, it will be obvious to me, whether or not your argument is based on principles, ideas that come from the author or not. And so I'll be looking for some explanation, not so much not so much explicitly like saying, okay, so I chose the concept of, human rights because da-da-da-da-da. Okay, you don't have to give an explicit justification for why you chose a particular concept to introduce. You simply have to show that you simply have to show how that concept is relevant and compatible with the author you've chosen to advocate for. Okay, that's a lot. I didn't say that very clearly, I don't think, but hopefully you are, of course, welcome to ask me about that now, or email me questions if it's not clear. But this is the most challenging, I think, of the essay questions, and so I hope that going over it is somewhat helpful, prepare you at least for it, and get you thinking about how to craft a relatively short essay to answer that question. Okay. That's all I got, folks. Those of you still around, do you have any questions or concerns? Any information that you want to share with the class, particularly about what your experience was on answering the essay questions on the first one? Feel free to chime in. Give you a few seconds here. So we are winding down. We're winding down the semester. I can't believe it. Okay, so one thing that I'll be doing over the next couple days is completing the grades on your last quiz, on quiz 9, which also had essay questions. And so if I find on those essay questions, like the ones that are on this quiz, that ask you to choose a normative theory and explain how it fits into the author's argument, if I find any factual errors in what you've written about how you've represented the normative theory, I will let you know about that so that you don't repeat those errors. So be looking for any feedback from me over the next 2-3 days. And it's just something to check in before you submit quiz 10, this quiz, just to make sure that you don't repeat errors that I've notified you of. Okay? All right, folks. Well, if you don't have any questions for me, I don't have any questions for you. And I appreciate you tuning in and hope this is helpful. Again, as always, shoot me an email, tweet, whatever. Get in touch with me if I can be of any help to you in preparing for this one. And I hope you enjoy the readings and the challenge of them. I think they're all three are stimulating, but I think it is a relevant topic, certainly, as was the last one, and looking forward to what you have to say about it. All right, folks, this is Dr. Joel Hunter once again, Truckee Meadows Community College, Intro to Ethics, Philosophy 135, and I'll see you later.